Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm Justin, and tonight we are going to discuss 1980s Terror Train, directed by Roger Spottiswoode and starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Ben Johnson, Hart Bachner, Derek McKinnon, and David Copperfield. 3 years after a fraternity prank went horribly wrong, a group of college students board a train for a New Year's Eve costume party. Alana still feels guilty over her part in the prank and is annoyed to find out that tonight's party was orchestrated by instigator Doc. Meanwhile, a mysterious magician performs his own tricks as one by one the students involved in the mean-spirited prank are murdered. Terror Train is among the golden age of early 80s slashers, often known by name, but runs the risk of getting lost with newer audiences. That would be a shame, as Terror Train takes a stylish turn off the regular track from standard fare at the time. Terror Train is for the horror fan that enjoys golden age slashers, Jamie Lee Curtis in her prime as a true scream queen, and a picture with a few tricks up its sleeves. Also joining me tonight is the amazing Zena Dixon. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm Justin, and with me, as always, is the beautiful, amazing, and talented, wonderful, real queen of horror, Zena Dixon. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well. Excited to talk about Terror Train, a movie that I think is like a title people know, but I'm learning that like newer generations coming into horror I haven't actually watched it. And, the first time I saw it, well, the first time I ever heard about it was in Scream when Nev Campbell's character is like looking through Randy's videos and she's like, The Fog, Prom Night, Terror Train. Why do all of his movies have Jamie Lee Curtis? And he's like, because she's the Scream Queen. But now I came into horror. I think Jamie Lee Curtis was definitely an influence for me. Again, Cooler Brothers growing up saw a ton of stuff, but I kind of put horror to the side. But Jamie Lee Curtis was in True Lies, my one of my favorite movies, as well as like My Girl 2. So in a class when Halloween came up that we were watching it, I'm like, well, Jamie Lee Curtis is in this, so I'll like it. But then like Jamie Lee Curtis is what got me into like that. Also, I was like, well, I gotta watch everything she's in now. So when Randy listed off those movies, I'm like, all right, Prom Night. Now, interestingly enough, I think I saw like Prom Night 2 and 3 and 4 like 100 times with my brothers as a kid, but the original never saw. Terror Train never even heard of or saw. So
Mm.
I finally came to it. Now, one of the great things about the late 90s, I'm sure you'll remember, is video stores. I miss them. But I was at a cousin's house and they had a video store called Movies. It was like a cow theme.
Oh,
And
cool.
for whatever reason, they happened to have a VHS copy of Terror Train previously used for like 5.99. I was like sold. This was when I was probably about 15 or 16. So any money I had was just disposable income. I was like, $6 done. And I loved it. It was everything and more that I wanted it to be. It still is too one of those movies. And everybody, as always, non-spoiler reviews. You're safe. You will not get bitten. We will let you know when spoilers are going to happen. But it's one of those movies that I can still watch, and it's the closest I can get every time I watch to still feeling that first time watching it. You have some movies that you watch a million times and you're never going to get that first time back. And that's the same for me with Terror Train, but I can almost get myself into that mindset. And I don't know, it just has this really great look about it. I mean, obviously it has Jamie Lee Curtis, but it's one of those movies that's very claustrophobic, but I always love the idea that there's like all these pockets and stuff that like you could hide in from the killer or the killer could be hiding in. And the first time I watched it, I didn't really care too much about like the magic stuff. I wanted to get to like the chase scene. It's like I watched these movies, the movies I watched. So I obviously had seen Scream and Halloween at this point, and that's when I started watching horror movie upon horror movie, every slasher I could get my hand on. And I would watch these movies with a certain expectation of it's got to have a little bit of a chase scene, some great kills, a good performance. That's kind of what I wanted. And so I'm like, okay, we got Jamie Lee Curtis, so I'm going to have my good performance. I'm seeing some good kills, great. And then it has one of my favorite chase sequences. So it at the time it just was everything that I wanted it to be. And I think 20 some years later, it holds up for me. I mean, it's 40 years, 44 years ago this movie was made now, but when I saw it 20 years, and it still is everything that I love about it. I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I think, and we'll get into this when we get into our performance and stuff, but I really think this is like the most well-rounded of her characters from that time of the Scream Queen generation. And I know that there's like always hit or miss about the term Scream Queen, but I personally think I've always said it and thought it as like an honor, a tribute, and I really think that there's become this like full circle. I think the women at the time who went through the Scream Queen title, because it meant more limited roles for them, it was hard. But now with like the celebration of conventions and all that, I think that like they wear it now, at least from my understanding, more. And I've always meant it as like an honor. And so with Jamie Lee Curtis, I think it's like one of her best Scream Queen roles. The scream itself, but also the performance she gives. And I love the character like Hart Bachner, the Doc character, the sort of setup of like something goes wrong and we're gonna pay for it in the end.
Mhm.
But I think everything about it's great. I love the look of it and all that. But it is a movie I definitely recommend. I definitely think that newer audiences coming in should definitely check it out. There's a remake now, so I of course recommend you see the original first. And we're going to talk a little bit about the remake later on for everybody in our later spoiler parts of the video. But I recommend Terror Train. We're going to go on and on about it and my love for it. But Zena, how was your first experience with Terror Train?
You know what's crazy? I don't remember. And
Hmm.
I was trying to think about it. It's one of those movies I think that was just always there. Like similar to your story, like um I'm pretty sure I watched it because of Jamie Lee Curtis, you know? And I watched it like it was like probably around the same time as you, maybe like in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, because I remember, and I'm still such a big fan of Prom Night, you know? And it's so good. So good. That dance sequence. It just has everything.
Yes.
Bring back disco horror. But anyway, yeah, I feel like with this one, I was trying to remember the first time, but I don't remember. But I do know it used to air on TV, on cable all the time, you know, late night and stuff like that. So I would catch like bits and pieces, and then eventually I'm pretty sure I watched it. I know we're gonna get to it, but this has one of the most shocking endings for me, you know, because what I think is crazy, and we talked about this off air too, that you know, kind of earlier what you mentioned, this is the kind of movie that for some reason the younger generation, even people who are around our age, I've met so many people who have not seen this movie because either it's just one of those movies that just fell in the crack, or they feel like they know what's going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you are sadly mistaken, you know, so sadly mistaken. And also, I feel like a lot of people, they compare it to Halloween, to The Fog, because those were released like right before it, you know? And I feel like that is just such big shoes to fill. But if I'm being honest with you, I absolutely love The Fog. It's one of like my favorite movies. I prefer Terror Train over Halloween. And we'll get into more details as to why. But I'll just say this, I just feel like for the people who have not seen it, it has pretty much everything that you want. You know, there's a chase scene, there's, you know, the not so nice characters that, you know, some not so great things are going to happen to them. And of course, there's just dead bodies piling up. And there's this whole cat and mouse thing. And when I even rewatched it today, I forgot the ending. I forgot who did it. Like I forgot. And so when I was watching it in live time, I literally screamed when it was revealed, you know, and that's how you know that it's a good time still to this day. So when I heard that they were making a remake, I was like, oh my God, yes, you know, I think that's a great idea. I probably would have had it have been like on a yacht, you know. So yeah, I guess it wouldn't have been Terra Train, Terra Yacht, Terra Boat, but you know what? I'm all for it. We'll get to it. It didn't make me dance, you know. But that's okay. But with this one, as an example, I do feel like they had big shoes to fill, like the remake, you know, and they definitely tried, and I appreciate their effort and stuff. And not saying that if you didn't see it, like don't check it out. I think that you should check it out. I still feel like it's if you're into like slashers and you want to see some bodies popping up, dead bodies everywhere, put that one on. It's free on Tubi. But yeah, just going back to this one, when I unfortunately I do not remember the first time that I watched it, but me today, because I watched it earlier today, it like revitalized me. It gave me so much life. It's one of those movies because, like I said, I'll meet people either if they've seen it before, they kind of when before they went in, they held it up so high, or people who haven't seen it because, it either fell in the cracks or, they feel like they know what's going to happen. And I just highly recommend checking it out. It does also have like an awesome cast. We're going to get into that, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis, but Vanity. Remember Vanity? She's in
Mhm.
this. So it was really
Yes.
cool to see her. So, but yeah, that's my thoughts.
All right, well then everybody, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers from here on out. You have been warned. Spoilers. Jumping into it then, just like you said though, yeah, I know what you mean about Halloween. Now, I love Halloween, but as I'm wearing my Halloween 2 t-shirt, I'm kind of more of a Halloween 2 guy. I
Mm-hmm.
love the original Halloween. I get why it's a masterpiece. I get why, it's a seminal masterpiece that influenced countless films. But when I go back to watch Halloween 2 is kind of the draw for me. Terror Train, I understand what you're saying. And it's interesting because I think the creators have always been very forthcoming that their idea for this was to recreate Halloween on a train. That was
Mm-hmm.
what they wanted to do. But I think that that's fine if that was the genesis of the idea, but I don't think that's the end result. I think that
Right.
like yes, of course, this Terror Trains of what's considered to be the golden age of slasher films, and so they're all going to have certain things in common. Like with this, if there's an event and then years later a killer coming back to sort of take revenge. I mean, sort of loosely done, if you want to compare Michael Myers to that. But it's very different. Michael Myers becomes sort of this boogeyman character, whereas the killer in this is very much flesh and blood. But one thing I really love about Terror Train that, so where Halloween took the idea of costumes and Halloween, like the pumpkins and the themes that we see with Halloween, Terror Train takes the idea of magic and
Mm-hmm.
illusion. And yes, costumes play a part in it, but it's a New Year's Eve sort of party. So the film begins at a college hazing where a very socially awkward kid believes he's going to make out with Jamie Lee Curtis's character. She's in on the joke, but not the full joke. She doesn't realize the extent. He ends up one of the Joker, Doc, he put an actual dead body in this bed. When he freaks out, we freeze frame on a really creepy moment, and then the movie begins, like the actual rest of the movie, which takes place on a train on New Year's Eve, and it's the same group of college kids, only now they're being targeted. And yeah, you can find trace similarities with Halloween, but I think that that's a pretty, there's an original concept to this. These aren't teenage babysitters, these aren't high schoolers. I like that this movie is more for the college age, it has that sort of element. But also the idea about a train where you can't just jump off, you can't
Mm-hmm.
just escape. You're stuck on this train at one point, and there's something scary about that. I mean, from the obvious elements of claustrophobia and falling off a train to that moment, there's a moment where Jamie Lee Curtis, when she finds out one of her friends is missing, her first question is like, "Did she fall off the train?" It must have been a thought. I've
Yeah.
never ridden like on a passenger train, but I would imagine that, I've ridden on the subway and stuff, but I must imagine that's a thing that you would be afraid to fall off. So there's already this inherent danger. But as we get into it, I think, we'll go with the performances of the movie and all that. But I did want to comment that just the magic and the illusion of the movie really is what makes this one kind of special.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at 14 or 15, when I saw this, yes, I want to kind of skip through the magic to get to the meat
Mm-hmm.
moments, the what I want to see. But when I go back to watch it now, I thoroughly enjoy those moments. And obviously, I want to talk about Jamie Lee Curtis, but as we're on the magic and we're about to get a performance, David Copperfield in this
Mm-hmm.
movie, one of the most infamous illusionist magicians of all time, has this role in this film. And at that time, he becomes this sort of red herring character. He plays the role very dark, very sort of mysterious, which would be part of the mystique of a magician. So that's kind of cool. But then also it lends itself to maybe thinking, especially because his name is also Ken, and maybe he's disguised himself, maybe some plastic
Right.
surgery. But and we'll get into all of that at the end, but obviously the killer has disguised himself, so
Mhm.
it could work that maybe David Copperfield. The first time I watched it, I'm like, is it maybe the killer? And there was a quality about watching those movies on VHS, which I obviously recommend having the Blu-ray. I have the UK Blu-ray. I love it how it looks, but you can see everything. Something about watching these movies on VHS back in the day, you sort of could just convince yourself that, oh, maybe it's just bad quality, or because I did not realize who the killer was. Now, looking at it
Mhm.
now, and I've had experiences going to drag bars or this, so I probably would recognize now the big reveal. But at
Right.
14 or 15, I just sort of took it for granted. Like, I was blown away by the ending and sort of like, oh, you kind of, I guess, subconsciously know something is off. But anyway, so David Copperfield is wrapped up in that, and he's going through doing his tricks, enchanting Jamie Lee Curtis, which would also make you almost think maybe he's the killer, because the good girl's gonna fall for the wrong guy in these types of movies. So it works on a lot of levels. But I just really love the addition of David Copperfield, and it really gives this movie something special with the whole magical element. But yes, Jamie Lee Curtis, again, I love her. Yes, prom night, bring back disco horror. I love, one of the things I love about the Blu-ray, when you let it just sit in your Blu-ray player and the menu's playing, it's literally the song and
Yeah.
then dancing over and over again. So it's
Yeah.
just, it actually just makes me so happy. Now, a lot of people, or especially when I listen to the audio commentaries, the thing that people keep saying about Jamie Lee Curtis in Terror Train is that she's pretty close to the character that she plays in him in Prom Night. Now, I think that there's some big differences. I think the thing that people see in it is Jamie Lee Curtis is one of those actresses, sort of like a Tom Cruise, where her personality, once she became Jamie Lee Curtis, she always brought that sort of persona out in her roles. Whereas as Laurie Strode, I think it's one of the roles where she was really acting, because she's not this repressed girl. She always had a big extroverted personality. So it's the one time she had to tone it down. But by the time she got to Terror Train, she had her confidence, and it was Jamie Lee Curtis. So when people, and Prom Night too, so, or as well. So I think people kind of combine that, like, oh, they're the same role. I don't think they're the same role. I think there's obviously similarities. I think that what she does in Kim is she has this, or as Kim in Prom Night, she has this very playful relationship with her brother, which is being set up for
Mhm.
the end. Whereas in Terror Train, I like that she plays the sort of, she's excited at the beginning of the movie to be a part of this sorority fraternity mixer. She feels terrible about the trick played
Mhm.
on Kenny, but she is also willing to kind of put a pin in that to have a good time. There's a moment where she confronts Doc, like, you take things too far, and he's like, you were there too, and it looks like she's gonna get upset, but she decides to, join in on the fun of the party. And so, I like that about it, like that she does feel bad, but she knows she can't go back and change it, so she's not going to be the martyr.
Mhm.
And when I like that, when so she has her boyfriend Mo in this, and Mo seems like an okay guy, but she's getting frustrated with his relationship with Doc, Hart Bachner. Now, Hart Bachner's character is fantastic. He's this jokester, prankster, love to hate him type guy. And there is definitely sort of a subtext, a homosexual undercurrent between him and Mo that I really like. Like, he keeps setting up Mo to be in a situation so that Jamie Lee Curtis's Alana will break up with him, because he then will say things to Mo like, "I'll always be here for you. You've always got me." And I love that. I think it's great. And so it makes it an interesting sort of extra subtext layer. But his character is, he's devious, and I wouldn't say he's maniacal. He's not a villain. He's not the antagonist, but he's not the hero. He's
Mhm.
not the good guy. And so ultimately, what makes this movie kind of special, I think, is that instead of Jamie Lee Curtis's Elena ending up with, like, running either as just, she becomes the final girl, but she doesn't end up with like Mo running through the train. She ends up with Doc running through the train. And I think that the sort of the friction between the two performances makes it more interesting of a movie. And
Hmm.
then you also have like Ben Johnson, who he's obviously supposed to be sort of the Donald Pleasance character or the sort of veteran actor that comes in, and he's charming and pleasant, and I love every moment with him. I love his little prank that he does, like with the card trick, and it's sweet and endearing. And he also knows that he'd be a wet blanket, I think he says, if he goes out too soon. So I really like he's super charming in this movie. And Derek McKinnon as Kenny. We already said spoilers, so I'm not going to sweat this. He is the killer in this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other way to talk about his performance without just revealing that. He really pulls off at the beginning this really awkward, socially awkward kid. He has this really scary moment, though, when the sheets are like wrapped around him, the way they play with his voice. And then the thing that's great about this is, unlike Halloween, where there's just the one mask, which is one of the most iconic, greatest masks of all time, Michael Myers. What's great about this movie is the setup are everybody's in costumes. So Kenny is switching from costume to costume to costume.
Hmm.
And each time it is Derek McKinnon, and each time it's horrifying in its own way. He's first as the Groucho Marx character. You can see the like simmering rage in his eyes as he's like watching these people that play this awful trick on him just having a good time. As the sort of lizard character when he's training Jackson,
Hmm.
he almost kind of, I don't know, sort of slithers through and is like making his way through the crowd. And then, I'm sure I had nightmares at some point or another when he wears the witch face costume that Mitchie, he takes that on. And when he's just running, there's
Hmm.
something genuinely off kilter, scary about it. But what's great about him, even as the magician's assistant, he's fabulous.
Hmm.
And I don't say that word lightly. I think it's the only word to say this, as he's in his red sequence dress and
Hmm.
floating here and, sashaying through. I mean, there was a real performance there. I guess his background is cabaret. He was a drag performer. I guess when he talks about Terror Train, he tends to, from different sources, embellish things a little, but I think that's probably the performer in him, and to make things larger than life. But he never takes this into a campy level. It's always genuinely scary and terrifying, I think. So Derek McKinnon, and I think Kenny is one of the great villains of the slasher era, if maybe not in all of horror movie. Yes, there's obvious homages to Psycho with cross-dressing, or there's clear ideas with the revenge, all this homages here to Alfred Hitchcock, but he does add his own spin to it. He
Hmm.
does make it something special.
You did a great job like summing it up. So I'll like speed by because I agree with a lot of things that you said. Jamie Lee Curtis, incredible.
Yeah.
I like her character, Elena. She seems very real, right? Because sometimes you have those girls who, or those final girls where it's just like, oh no, I can't do that. Like they're just whiny the whole time. And I don't feel like she was whiny. Like I felt like she felt bad. And not saying that it's okay. She's in college and her friends that she decided to hang around with, after what happened with Kenny, she did decide to continue to hang out with them because she did want to have a great college experience, which in some ways is understandable. She did try to visit him in the hospital. She says that, and they wouldn't allow her to see him. So I don't think that, what could she do? Just keep on beating herself up for years? It was a horrible, horrible, tragic prank. I'm not saying that it's okay, but I don't feel like she should keep on living in the past? As far as it goes with her character, with the character Mitchie, I really like her. She reminds me, which I do not remember her name, but the movie Hell Night. There's a girl in there who has like a
100%.
similar vibe. Yeah.
Yes.
Like I feel like they would be besties. I don't remember
Yes.
her
Oh, it's right on
name,
the tip of my tongue. It's
right?
like, that's Sophie. I know exactly what you're talking about, though. I love her
Yes.
in it. Yeah, she's sort of with the Vincent Van Patten character,
Yes.
the other blonde, like the two blondes get together.
Hmm.
And
That's the one.
100%, I think. Yes.
So yeah, really loved her character. The character Mo, I just feel like Elena, she was eventually going to break up with him because they just seem like that he was just meant to be like a college, boyfriend. He seems like he's the kind of friend or the kind of boyfriend who is very much a follower, that he'll listen to everything that Doc is going to say. And so it just seemed like Elena, she just wanted to have a good time, so she would just deal with it later. I feel like she knew that he wasn't her forever, that she wasn't going to marry him. The magician, I love that the magician, he's so he was so charming. You know what I mean? He was mysterious, he was charming, and like you, I thought it was him. And like I said, I know it's so weird. I've watched this movie so many times, but it's been a while. I'll admit, it's been a while since I watched it, right? And so when the ending happened, and it's just like, whoa, right? So, well, we did say we could spoil it, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, the magician, his head, pretty much his body is stuffed away somewhere, right? In a safe. And it's just like, it was shocking because I was shocked. I was like, what? Like I never seen it before. And it was just, it was amped from there. So my point is, he was that character where we all thought, oh my gosh, it's him. It's him. Because I did.
Mm,
And at first I was just thinking, well, maybe she can have some type of romance with him. I just thought that, the magician was Kenny, but Kenny had plastic surgery, or maybe he just grew into his looks. That happens. Sometimes you have those people who get those sprouts, those last minute
yes, yes.
sprouts. Yeah. Love that scene where the killer is wearing a mask, and Jackson is talking to him, and you could see the hate in his eyes. Like I
Yes.
felt it. Like,
Yes.
woo, just run away. Run away. But he didn't know, and that bathroom scene, we'll get into it more. It is just I love that scene. So there's that. Oh, and then Vanity as Mary. I like her character. We didn't really know too much about her, and I agree with you. She was, at first like with the crowd, but then she started getting closer, like to the girls and everything like that. And I love the fact that she was there for Elena at the end. And Ben Johnson's character, Karn, I love his character so much. I was interested in everything that he had to say. I just want him to save me. I want to hang out with him all night, guys. I don't want to party with you. Let's just see what he's doing when he's making his rounds. And Kenny, 100% what you said, hands down, he is one of the best, if not the best, slasher characters, like killers. Like he's so underrated. And I feel like there could have been a sequel because clearly it seemed like there was always something there. He wasn't always, you know, stable, right? You could tell that he
It's
wasn't always stable. And I think when that happened with the corpse, which is insane, like what kind of prank is that? They should have went to jail personally. But what kind of prank was that? But that completely seemed like it just triggered him, right? And it could have opened up for a sequel. I don't know how he would have survived, but figure it out because I would have loved to have seen him again, especially, going after Elena again. Because Elena, like
no,
we talked about already, I really do feel like she is a very much a likable final girl. And we'll touch on this with the remake, you know, the remake Elena, I didn't really vibe with her. It's like I feel like she was a likable person, like on the surface, but it was just like she was too much of a pushover. You know what I mean? And that's one thing about Elena in this movie. I did not feel like she was a pushover. She knew what was wrong and she knew what was right and she stood her ground. So yeah, I love the characters because again, we have those characters that we've seen before, but I feel like with this one, they took it a little bit further. Even with the character Doc, like you could tell too, like he probably has a lot of like family stuff riding on him. He probably comes from like a really good family. They're probably financially stable. He has plans. So this is just going to be something of his past. He just had to get out of there. Like that last couple of scenes that we had with him, man, it's just like you just felt him just trying to survive, and it wasn't, because you're trying to survive. It was actually maybe for someone else, and not so much like, oh, they'll care about me. It wouldn't be a good look for his family if that's the way he pretty much ended off. So, but yeah, again, you see on the surface, like, this fraternity, this frat, president, like he's an a-hole, don't really care for him type of guy, right? And then going into it a little bit more deeper, You have issues yourself. And I think that probably that night with Kenny probably did something to him as well.
One thing I want to mention that I think you make a good point about is how did they get away with, the fact it's surprising they didn't go to jail. But I think you also said something else, Cena, that also is why they probably didn't go to jail because Doc is probably well off. These
Mhm.
are, kids or college kids in the 80s, you had a little bit more money to go to college. And so therefore, they probably had came from families that covered this up, got it, got it out of the way. Now it's never explained in the movie or whatever. But I think that you danced right on the point, which is that's probably how they got away with doing this prank, is their families probably bailed them out of it. And so again, now Doc in the situation present time is gonna, if things had gone a different way, would probably have to get out of it a different way.
Right.
But back then, I want to say, I think that that is something that people, when they watch this movie, because I've heard it on the audio commentary too, where they're like, how did they get out of this? But I think you made a good point, which is the money. They probably come from money.
Mhm.
So I wanted to point that out. But also, because I forgot to mention it in my Jamie Lee Curtis part of the performance, which you made me think of, is that her relationship with Mo. And one of the things I love is when you're right, they probably wouldn't have lasted, or he was going to have to finally leave Doc, if you will, for lack of a better phrase. But one moment I really love from Jamie Lee Curtis is when her and Mo, they're fighting when she finds out this is really Doc's plan, because she said she was never going to go to another one of Doc's parties. This is one of his plans, his parties. She's pissed at Mo for letting her leave otherwise.
Mhm.
So he's following her around, and then when they're in front of other people, they're being cordial to each other, but there's a tension if you notice it. And then when he finds out that she's still mad, he sort of makes a comment about it, like, "Oh, are you still mad?" And so she's pointing out, like, like, says something very cliche, which is, well, with a friend like him, you don't need an enemy. And he's like, kind of makes fun of her, where he's like, oh, do you think of that of yourself? And she looks at him, no, 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 stands up and walks away. And it's Jamie Lee Curtis because, yes, it is a cliche thing to say. It is sort of hokey, but he's in the wrong. He lied. And
Mhm.
so she's like, that's not the point. And I'm trying to help you surround yourself with maybe better people. Elena, like you said, Zena, she wants to have a good time. She wanted to have a good college experience, but she's now starting to question these people a little bit.
Mhm.
And with Mo, she wants them to do the same if they're going to have a future together. But now, as we get into our favorite sequences, I'll just say, I do enjoy all the establishing train shots. I think it really adds kind of a mood to the film. One of the audio commentaries, I have the UK Blu-ray. When they both kind of came out, they were both about the same price. I was like, well, I'll get the UK one. Why not? I have a region free player. And now the like regular Blu-ray is like $50, and I'm like, I would spend it. I'm just waiting to see. But anyway, the
Yeah.
audio commentary is on there. So when I reference those, if people haven't heard this commentary, this is why. But they'll talk about how they really didn't care for the train shots. They feel like they're kind of cheap. I don't know, maybe, but I like them. I think it sets it up. I also really enjoy just all the magic scenes. Like I said, when I was young watching this, I couldn't get through them fast enough. But now I don't know. It's sort of, I guess, the same how you meant referenced the prom night disco. I
Mhm.
like the sort of disco-y feel to this, the sort of like almost Studio 54 in a train club part, like I like that. I really enjoy every kill. I always feel weird saying that, but I enjoy every kill in the film. I think each one's interesting, unique. I think in some of the commentaries, but I've also heard this around that like there's always sort of the smug, well, and I'm sorry if you feel this way, but there's always the comment that like Kenny couldn't have done it all. I think he could have. I think that's part of
Yeah.
okay, I
Mhm.
think that's part of this movie is the fact, but it's like they give you outs for it. Like clearly at one point David Copperfield's like, I made my assistant disappear, but now I'm going to need her back. And
Right.
in that time is when most of these kills happen. Or there's the kill at the train station. You said something else too that I wanted to comment on, which is part of my favorite scenes. So at the beginning, like they, the one kill with the guy on the tracks, or with Jackson, we have to remember they're drunk,
Mhm.
like they're partying and drunk. And I feel like people when they watch this, it's so easy. You've heard it. I know you have
Mhm.
about people when they criticize saying that people do dumb things in horror movies. Context, context, context. One, they don't know they're in a horror movie, and two, these are college kids getting drunk and stoned. So they're not always paying attention. So the reason I say that though is because at the beginning, I always hear the comments about, oh, how did nobody see on the platform that Ed, I couldn't think of his name, that Ed was killed. Well, they're all boarding up. When you were that age, when I was that age,
Mhm.
I would be excited going on a train. I wasn't like looking like, let's who's down there? You know, I'm like, what's going like, let me get on this train, you know, and that's what I think the kids are doing. And it's so weird to me that people never
Mhm.
like put themselves in the character's shoes. I thought that was just something we all automatically did. You know, like put ourselves in the
Yeah.
character's shoes. Isn't that part of the fun?
I agree with you 100%. I have heard that before because with the character Kenny, he is smaller. He's a smaller guy. And so people would say, well, how would he do that? What do you mean? Like you said, they're drunk and they're high. They don't know what's going on. They're at their most vulnerable type of state. That's the perfect time for him to do it. Then on top of that, I feel like he did do all the kills. It was like even when I'm like thinking about it and when I rewatch it and everything like that, you're as the viewer, I'm not really thinking about the assistant. I'm not. It's like
Right,
I'm
right.
college students, like I'm ready. I was gonna say I'm ready to get drunk and hot. No, I'm not. But I'm one of the college students where it's just like you're paying attention to everything else that's going on. And think about if you were there, it's a party. So no, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I really love this movie. It has such a creative idea because it's on a train and it isolates people. And you know what I mean? It's very isolating when the kills happen. So
Yes.
yes, it can happen. You know what I mean? 100%.
Well, and to even emphasize it more, we learned by the end, but throughout the film, we have a magician. Kenny is a
Hmm.
magician. He is skilled at making himself disappear,
Right.
appear here, using his surroundings to create illusions. I see 1,000 ways that he could achieve this. And
Hmm.
you know what it's like too, going back to the drunk thing. I'm sure you have been at parties or something where everybody else was drunk and you weren't. You're telling me
Hmm.
you couldn't get a couple like fast ones by some of these people when they're drunk and
Good.
inebriated? Like, it's pretty easy. And again, everybody's in costume and you think you're talking to your friend.
Hmm.
You're going to be more trustworthy. Anyway, so these aren't specific scenes, but I just want to emphasize that I think that in each of the scenes, they're really good of the kills. And I think that they're all achievable by Kenny, and I think that each kill is really great. Jackson's is, abrupt, but like you said, and I agree 100%, the eyes from Derek McKinnon, he hates Jackson. You see
Hmm.
the hate coming through the mask. And so it's pretty abrupt in the bathroom. But with Mitchie's character, when he's now in the Jackson Lizard costume, and the hand, it's a very common theme of like you have a dead hand, you drop it, but it works incredibly well here because she's isolated. Because you now know
Hmm.
like it's not like in a bed in a bedroom where she can roll off and get out of here.
Right.
There's no escape. And I think
None.
that's what makes each kill really effective in Terror Train.
Mhm.
So I love the magic. I think all the kills are great and possible. But I think my other favorite scene is I started to say this earlier. I love Jamie Lee Curtis's character of Elena, and I love Hart Bachner's character as Doc. He is
Mhm.
super charming, handsome, but he's also a jerk. So I like that in the end, well, not in the end, but of the friends in the end, they have to end up together and they have to kind of rely on each other. And it works on a lot of levels because they're the two that could solve the mystery and they don't solve it, but they're on the right track. But because of their animosity towards each other, they can't figure it out. They can't
Right.
solve it and they can't work together so that both of them are going to survive. And I love the interactions between the two of them, but also when he locks her out and you see the figure coming down and she's begging him to let her back in. And you see his character on full display, the awful, selfish person he is. He's not opening that door. He hears her screams and he's like, "You made your choice. Goodbye." And
Yeah.
I don't
He
know. I
was.
think that's a really terrible thing, but a really great
Hmm.
scene. Leading then, of course, until to Doc's scene, which I think you said was one of your favorites. I'll let you get more into it, but I'll just say, yeah, that's when I was alluding to at the beginning, when I still watch this movie, how Doc is in the scene when he's now alone. is
Hmm.
how I felt watching these movies when I was like 14 or 15, the sort of like checking under here, something over there, somebody could be up there. That's what
Hmm.
always really I thought was effective about Terror Train and movies like Terror Train, the sort of like I was the type of person if I would go spend the night at a friend's house during the years that I loved became fans of the slasher, I would always look at their house and be like, oh, I could run through that staircase and out that window and jump down there or whatever. So I'm similar to Doc in that way of like, oh, there could be somebody hiding there. So that's why I love that scene too. Because ultimately, my favorite scene though of the movie, which we'll get into with the end and the climax, is the chase scene. I think it's magnificent. We'll get into it. But Zena, what are some of your favorite scenes, suspense moments, et cetera, et cetera?
So just again going back to the moment, I love that bathroom scene with Jackson leading up to it. It just kind of creates the tone, well, first the beginning, the opening of the movie creates the tone that you know what you're getting yourself into, that is very much cruel and unapologetic. And then, it's crazy because I remember like when I watched it, it was like when Kenny was spinning and he started screaming, it was just kind of like I did laugh. I'm sorry because it was just like, whoa, like I was uncomfortable, right? But it was like, leading up to it with the dead, like the corpse, and
Yeah.
it's just like, well, that's just gross, and that's honestly seriously cruel. So that sets the tone. But then once again, it kind of lights the fire again. Like I felt like even though we had that kill scene right outside the train station, but the one in the bathroom, it felt personal. And
Yeah.
obviously it was personal. So that's why, so I really love, and that sounds weird, like what you said, like, oh, I like that death scene, but
Right.
we get it. We're horror fans. And then I
Exactly.
honestly, I love the scenes as well, like with the magic, because it kind of adds to it. I think that, you know, that being at a college party, it kind of breaks some stuff up because clearly they have like a long ride ahead. So instead of just drinking and partying and doing all this other stuff, here's a magic show. And I think that's
Mhm.
fun.
But now, as we get towards the ending, which we'll start with the final, the final girl showdown with her, Elena. I think it's already been established through Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in this, and she said in interviews that with Terror Train, she really did try to find ways to make her character a little more special, make it oomph a little bit more. And I think she does. I think moments like in the train car when she's confronting Doc about the prank, and because he's telling these new pledges or younger college
Oh,
kids in a like proud way, and she totally calls him out on it. Now, again, Doc calls her out and is like, "Hey, you were in on it too." But you see clearly that she's not one to just sit and take it. She's going to
right.
fight back, or she's going to cut you off, like she does with Mo when he makes his, condescending sort of remark to her. And so you've seen throughout that Elena is playful. She is
Mhm.
fun. She's energetic, but she's also tough and she's also firm about what she believes. I think she knows she did something wrong. I think she forgives herself a little because she was younger when it
Yeah.
happened, but I also think that she takes accountability for it. And so when the final chase scene happens, which we've seen this like blow up doll throughout the movie, which the remake also takes its own like play with it with a mannequin type or the resuscitation doll. But so I've always thought again on VHS it works a little bit better that like the setup where she's sort of disguising it as her, so when the killer comes in, take him on, take him out. So you have Doc is killed and it's just as creepy and you see him beheaded. Well, Elena, she's on full alert. She's like in this room because they're trying to protect her. You see the guard outside's been killed. From then on out, I feel like it's a race to the end, and in the best possible way. Not like to get it over as fast as possible, but like it becomes a marathon. It's a sprint, and so she takes him out, and he's chasing her through these narrow hallways, and it's sort of like what it's like when you kind of get you kind of get spooked about something and you're running. He is right there on her heels, but she's shutting doors as he's breaking through them. She's getting
Yes.
through there. But one of the things that's a little different is he really does get to like touch her. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is like usually that might happen at the very end of one of these, and she'll get away or whatever. But like he rips an earring out of her ear when he's like shoving her down. I think Jamie Lee Curtis really like bashed her head kind of a little on this
Mhm.
doorknob, and they're fighting. But then she ends up, and it's again the thing that like when I'm watching horror movies or back in the day when I would go into certain rooms or something, the sort of cage she ends up in, I could see myself of being like, would I have ran or would I have gone into that myself? And I love that it's a nice tense moment of she's trapped, but he can't quite get to her. I think that's incredibly effective. But also, so she figures out a way out of this. But the moment that gets me every time is right after that cage. She has stabbed him with the thing from the desk, and he falls
Hmm.
down. So she breaks to the door, but right as she runs out, he gets up. It's not a supernatural movie terror train or anything, but in a way, and I think it's Derek McKinnon's performance, his physicality, the
Right.
way he gets up gives me the chills every time. And it's also the costume he's in because now he's in like the witch face costume, but with the long, not gown, but I don't know, cloak, whatever. And he
Yeah.
gets up like a ghost or something unnatural and is chasing her, and he's right there. I love that he's always right there, enough that you think Jamie Lee Curtis can always escape, but close enough that one false move and she's not going to. And so she finally, we think they knock off the train, and we get to, things are seemingly okay. But then, like you mentioned, the whole magician, when you see his head in the sort of sword box thing, and you're like, all bets are off. And I love the moment too, where she's looking out the back of the train off the caboose, and like, it seems like things are going to be okay. It seems like safe. And then, nope, we've got she realizes, wait, the magician's dead, so it couldn't have been him. But she was right though. It is Kenny, just he wasn't
Mhm.
Kenny. And you see the reveal now of Kenny. And he pulls off the mask, he pulls off this, he's wearing the wig, revealing to us, the audience, he was the magician's assistant. The illusion of this movie, it's one illusion after another. And he's basically like, I was here the whole time. And again, it was Jamie Lee Curtis that came up with the idea to recreate the kiss, because a lot of people, I think on an audio commentary, I heard somebody said something to the effect of like, I feel like it sucks that Jamie Lee Curtis is the one to take him out, though. It's Carney, and he's like, I feel like Jamie Lee Curtis has earned that. But I feel like Jamie Lee Curtis is the one to take him out because of that kiss. That's what sends him spiraling. It makes him completely vulnerable again, so that Carney can hit him with the shovel. So yeah, she may not have had the shovel and knocked him out because Elena decided to give Kenny finally that kiss that started this whole thing. That's what defeats him. That's what renders him harmless. He's now harmless. But his voice, as he's like saying, "You haven't changed," his
Yeah.
voice, his look at her, he
Hmm.
hates her. The kind of hate that you get when you have loved
Hmm.
somebody and now you hate them.
Yep.
Like, and she, he's just like, I know why he hates me. The
Hmm.
look on her face is she knows why he hates her. She knows why he wants to kill her. He
Yeah.
maybe has a right to, like she has this look of like, but I will do whatever to make up that I can. And it defeats him. So I just think it's a great ending. He falls,
Yeah.
his like legs when he hits, it's great.
Man, I love a good chase scene just like you. And I was living for that scene. Like it literally had me on the edge of my seat because at this point, she's probably tired. Like outside of like her friends dying around her, she's been partying, but then now all this stuff is happening, right? And so when you mentioned that, okay, should she run away from him or should she go like towards that corner where he can't really get her? I was thinking she might as well should just go in that corner because that's what I would do. At this point, you can't outrun him. Where are you going to go? Where are you
Yes.
going to go? Right. And so then I love the fact that I feel like she was making smart decisions, in my opinion, that she went in that corner and he couldn't quite get her. And then from there, even with that kiss scene, you know, man, you could tell that he was holding on to that. Kenny was holding on to that for years, and it ate away at him. And like you said already, he hates her. Like the look in her eye, like the look in his eyes, he absolutely hates her. But once again, I love the character Elena. She's all about accountability. It's not like, no, it wasn't me. You know what I mean? Like she was
Right.
all about it. She owned up for it. She wanted to make up to it. But it's like, there's nothing she could do at this point. You know what I mean? Obviously, no, don't just sit there and get murdered. You have to do something. So it's just like, I feel like even though it's like she did have the doing, like it was because of her, Carney was able to do that. I feel like I like that it wasn't her that did it. Because in a way, she's done enough. You know what I mean? When it came to him and just his whole life. And it was just like, there's no saving him.
I like
I
that.
don't feel like, yeah, I just don't feel like any amount of, counseling therapy could help him. Like clearly he was, it was only 3 years, but he probably came up with this whole thing while he was hospitalized. I do feel like Kenny did terrible things, but he's a victim,
Yes.
and it's unfortunate. So it's just like he sadly could not get the help that he needed. But yeah, I just love the fact again that it was Carney that actually did it instead of Elena, and that she was all about accountability. And then, that's more on like a psychological, emotional type of thing. But leading up to it, us fans who love chase scenes, who love slashers, run like living for it. You know what I mean? Where
Yes.
it's just like still to this day, it is an older movie, but it's still so effective. And that scene when he pretty much tells her to kiss him again, you could feel it. Like not the kiss, but just the tension. You know what I mean? That raw, uneasy tension. And again, it is an older movie, but it's there. It is 100% there. So that's why I keep on saying when I heard that there's going to be a Terror Train remake, yeah. Yeah. So there's that. But no,
Yeah.
the ending when it was revealed and like, again, we saw the magician in the safe with the swords. Oh my God, what? That's how it was. Who could it be? And then he's holding onto her arm, then he starts taking off stuff, and then there's a wig. I'm like, what? And then when they do like the shots where they're going back and forth, and they show that it was the assistant, and he was there the whole time, just there, and no one noticed. I didn't notice. I
Yeah.
didn't notice. And he spoke obviously a couple of times. I'm just like, didn't think anything of it. Like, remember that particular scene where Carney is just like, oh, is he back there, the magician? And he's like, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I even thought like, oh, the assistant is probably like, has an axe in the back of her and her back,
Right.
and she's gonna fall over. But no, she walked out, it was fine. And then it's just like, oh my, who came up with this? Because I feel like it is pure genius. And I do feel like if anyone says that when I watched it, I knew it, you're lying. And I'm calling you a liar. I don't feel like you're telling the truth at all. So, and sometimes that happens because think about it. Obviously, we've been watching horror movies our whole lives. And the fact that it was shocking when you first watched it, and it's still shocking now. Like I was seriously,
100%.
I gasped. Like I screamed. I was just like, what? So yeah, and then when you think back, because this is a movie where there are some parts where there's more talking, right? But it
Mhm.
all comes together and it's worth it. Like the ending, like it's chilling. It's honestly a chilling ending because it's just like when you think about how much somebody hates someone so much and that this is what they're willing to do. And it's just we've seen it. Like obviously we'll talk about Michael Myers, but Michael Myers didn't dress in drag,
Right.
So
Right. Commitment.
yeah.
Well, and I
So, but
love there's a scene where, when there's only one scene where you really get a close up of Kenny before, as the assistant,
mhm,
before the reveal, where he's holding this like sword and he's like, but he has this like feminine quality. But when you see
mhm,
the face, and on Blu-ray, when you see the face, after knowing it's Kenny, you're like, how did I not know that's Kenny?
right?
But when you're the first time through, you're like, I did not, I thought that was a woman. I thought it was a girl, So it just goes to show, again, Derek McKinnon's performance should be more thought of in the horror community
Yeah.
and how he was able to just swim through these roles. But yeah, are you ready to talk about a little bit about the remake in terms of
Oh,
well, I was just gonna say I watched it. I only saw it once. I liked that like I like remakes. I liked Gus Van Sant's Psycho, where it's a shot by shot remake. I love Rob Zombie's Halloween, that it's a completely different thing. This is somewhere in the middle, maybe a little closer. It's very close to
mhm,
it's the biggest change is instead of Elena, her name is Alana. But
mhm.
otherwise, it's pretty close. And
Yeah.
yeah, the only times I really identified with this Alana was when she was with her version of Mo. Like in the scenes with him, there was sort of a more both the actors seemed to relax. I feel like
Mhm.
there was a more tense, not tense because there's the characters are scared, like tense like the actors were very tense.
Right.
Um, I liked the vibrant colors of the movie. Not that
Mhm.
it wasn't like Suspiria colors, but like it had a vibrancy about it.
Yeah.
but it lost. And again, taking a character that's a man dressing like a woman to then change the killer, and again, spoilers, everybody, I'll just say to be a woman.
Hmm.
Clever idea, but you lose then the whole. And with this magician's casting, the thing we talked about in the 1980 Terror Train is you could kind of maybe think there's a red herring with the magician.
Hmm.
I never once for a second thought this magician was Kenny. So it is sort of like, well, why would this magician be doing anything, to these kids
Right.
other than, yeah, he makes some like nasty comments about them, but like there's no other real motivation. So I thought it was fine. I wasn't, it's never, and we've talked about it. We're fans of remakes, you and I. So for me to say that I didn't particularly care for it, and I wouldn't even say I didn't care for it, but to say I didn't love it is just not us saying like, oh,
Right.
remake. We love remakes, you and I, and we're always like, let's get a remake. But yeah, I'm with you on it that like it just seemed kind of tepid to me. I
Mhm.
never got scared. And I loved the tribute. It felt like a tribute to the original in a
Yes.
way that it's sort of like, let's just watch the original then. Thank you for making this tribute though.
Right.
Like that's kind of
That's
how I felt about it.
That's exactly how I felt. And I think that that's why I'm not a big fan. Like, I'm right there with you. I love how vibrant it is. Like, when I first
Yeah,
saw the poster, I'm here for it because I do love to be original movies, regardless of how people may feel. I always feel entertained. You will be entertained, but I think it's
absolutely.
just because I'm really in love with the original one. So the fact that where it's just like, they pretty much follow or try to follow the same formula. Mine is like when we talked about, like you said, with the changing of the little bit of the name, and then even with the magician, he wasn't charming. In fact, he just wasn't likable. He didn't really,
Abrasive. Hmm.
yeah, he didn't really like them at all. And I felt like that was, to me, that was kind of a letdown because with David Copperfield, he had this like effortless type of thing going on and it felt forced. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I feel like
Yes.
that's what it was about this one. Like, I appreciate the fact that they try to do it. I still like that it takes place on a train. But and then even with the sequel, I have to be honest with you, I don't think I watched the sequel. Um
I haven't seen it
I
yet.
can't remember it at all, but they came out pretty close together, like maybe even a year apart, if even that. But yeah, I'm not saying don't check it out. Like, obviously, if you
For
like
sure.
slashers, check it out, give it a go. Just separate them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But you perfectly said it. I feel like it does. It's more of like it's paying tribute to it. So you
Mhm.
could probably, I'm probably thinking that the people behind this, they're probably fans of it, which is understandable, like the original one. With Terra Train 2022, I will say this: the ending is pretty cool, but by the time that happens, it's a little bit too late for me. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I mean, stay, watch it, check it out, see how you feel about it. And then with the original Terror Train, I think that we all need to watch it maybe once a year or something. It's just I feel like honestly and truly, it's one of those movies.
Yeah, I think that it's a title, again, it's a title that I think everybody kind of knows that now. If you're getting into horror, you know what Terror Train is. But I've been surprised to hear, see, understand that not many people have actually watched it though. And
Hmm.
it's worth watching. It is one I think that should be revisited once a year. We chose this one because I think it's a winter horror movie for sure. It could be enjoyed any time of year. Again, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis in the prime of her Scream Queen years. You've got a twist with a magician. You've got a great villain that I think gets underplayed, and it hits all the bars of what people expected to see at the golden slasher time in history of horror. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Are you a fan of Terror Train? What's your favorite Jamie Lee Curtis performance? Have you seen the remake? Are you a fan of Terror Train? Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us tonight. As always, you can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker, or over at Wicked Horror. And I'm Justin. You can also find me at Wicked Horror, over One Pop Culture, or over at Blue Sky or Twitter. Links below for all of these. Thanks for watching, and thanks, Zena, for joining. I'm so glad we finally got to discuss Terror Train.
Me too. Thank you again. I had such a blast, as always.
Absolutely. And we'll see y'all soon. Bye.